Hello, hope all is well. So today we're going to be looking at a Marshall preset. Yes, another Marshall preset that I put together for the FRACTAL unit. And this is based on the jumped Plexi or the 1959 SLP in the jumped mode. So what do we mean by jumped mode? So the Plexi has two channels per se, which you can plug into on the actual amp on both like a high and a low input for both. It's a treble gain and a normal gain. And by using a jumper cable between the two, you can then blend both channels per se to get different kinds of tones. So the thing here is we have the treble gain and the normal gain. I'll do a quick demonstration of each by themselves, and then we'll see what kind of tones we can get with a blend of both. So hopefully that gives a good idea of how the two gains sound like. I mean, the treble gain is obviously very clear, and a typical use would be just to use the treble input. And if you look within the FRACTAL unit, you also just have the treble side or the treble channel per se that's also in there, and also the normal that's in there. But we're going to be using the jumpered version so that we can blend both quite easily. And the normal gain is quite, I guess, flubby, if you want to use a term for that, or quite, well, bass heavy. And the cool thing is when you combine both, you can add some of that girth, I guess, back into the signal, which can be really useful when balancing things out, for example, for single coil guitars. So say a single coil guitar into just the treble gain is pretty bright, and of course you can use the EQ to some extent, but I find I get the best results by dialing in some of the normal gain to get that kind of balance that I want. So with the cab here, we're actually going to be using the LCFR-150 speaker from Lichtlaerm Audio. And this is an IR that John Brown, or the other John Brown on YouTube, huge thanks again for the IR, I'll link to his channel in the description below, made of the speaker. And I made another video on this speaker for a sort of metal preset. And I liked the sound so much, or the response through the IR, that I thought, let's try out some other amps. And yeah, I made a Plexi preset with this speaker. So the thing I wanted to show here was that by keeping the amp at the same setting and then using your guitar's volume, or if you prefer, there's also a volume block at the start, so you can use a volume pedal. You can get all sorts of different tones through basically the same amp and cab, and just adding on, say, boosts and other effects for source, I guess. Now the big thing here is that there is no gate in the input block. So when you load up the preset, you will be getting hiss. But that's not unlike what you would get when using a Plexi, particularly at those sort of volumes. I mean, the hiss would be a lot louder. As you can see, there's a lot going on in front of the amp, and just a delay and a reverb after the amp. I'm a huge fan of delays in front of like a dirty amp per se. So an amp that's on the edge of breakup or even gained up, I like the sort of sounds that you get when the delays and the repeats are sort of also taking on the amp's character per se. Because if you put a delay after an amp, it'll be a lot cleaner, obviously, but I like how the delay repeats get sort of gained up by the amp. So that's why we have that block here. The thing here is that we're running the mix fairly low so that the repeats don't get too loud, if that makes sense. But that's obviously something that you can mess with as well. Now the big thing here on the preset, then, this is something that I do on all my sort of delay reverb blocks, is in the EQ tab, I'm always shaving off low end. So low cut's always around the kind of 150 mark. And that's to help clear things up. You can also mess with the high cut frequency to get a different kind of tone if that's something that you prefer. But these are things that I'll maybe have a look at a later date in another video. And the thing with the cab block, as said, we're using the LCFR-150 IR from John Brown. I'll put this within the preset as well in the bundle so that it's a bit easier to download. But I'd really recommend checking out his video on the speaker. Within the cab block, we're using an amp preamp, sorry, a mic preamp, which is the Modern. And there's a bit of drive behind there to get a bit of the character. And I find it gives a nice kind of vibe to the actual general sound. And this is also where we're using a high cut and a low cut for the cab. So a low cut of 80 Hertz and a high cut of 10K. You can of course play with this to suit your taste. And outside of that, on some scenes, and this is something that I use on some of the more ambient kind of presets that I like to set up, is that we're using stuff before the amp and then after the amp. But in essence, we're using different delays and also tremolo in this case to cascade tap tempos, if that makes sense. So on the delay in front of the amp and the cab, it's a quarter note dot, which is like a slower sort of quarter note. And after the amp, we have a delay that's set to a quarter note. And then the pan tremolo is set to an eighth note. So that's pretty quick. But the effect of having the quarter note dot and then the quarter note after the amp is that you're getting this kind of slow, kind of bouncing, cascading style effect of having these two tempos. And that's something I find fun to play with. So if you want to try a different tempo, say on the delay in front of the amp, I'd suggest trying one of the other dotted settings. Obviously, the slower you get, the more, the slower it's going to be, and that cascade will sound different. But you can also try, say, a dotted eighth note. You could even try one of the triplet notes to get a different kind of sound and feel. So the thing here is to use a different setting, or a different tap tempo to the second delay. So if the second delay, that being a quarter note, set the first one to anything but a quarter note to see if there's something cool that you like the sound of. And I will note there are also multi-delay blocks, dual delay blocks and things like that where you can do that all in one delay block. But I'm using two different delays as I like the sound of a delay in front of the amp, getting those repeats, the repeats being affected by the amp, and then a cleaner delay that's set after the amp. So there's a preset. The link is in the description below on my Ko-Fi page, so free or pay what you want. And I hope you enjoy it. It's a lot of fun to play through. I find, especially when you're either noodling by yourself or playing to different sort of classic tracks and doing solos and things like that. And the big thing is really all the dynamics that you get in front of an amp, such as the Plexi, by just using your volume knob or using the volume block within the FRACTAL unit if you use a volume pedal. So I hope you enjoy it and hope to see you in the next one. Take care.